All right, here we are. We're going live in the studio with a couple of docs here. Gonna have a good conversation, talking about brain health, life, a whole bunch of things. So, welcome to the podcast today, docs. Thank you for your time.
Here
I appreciate you guys both coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right. One of the things I like to start my podcast out with is a little introduction and background. So, Brandon, you've been with me one other time. We had a really fun talk.
Yep.
Would you mind just telling our audience who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So first of all, thanks for having me again. It was a riot last time, and it's going to be a good one this time. So I'm definitely honored to be with this guy here. We'll learn about him in a minute. So Dr. Brandon White, I'm a second generation chiropractor. Anybody that listened to the podcast last time knows that I had a little bit of a challenge in life that kind of got me to where I am right now, to this seat, talking with these fellas here. Been a chiropractor for 21 years. I've been practicing the world of functional medicine for about 20 of those. My practice has evolved into just treating the whole person. So, and that's what we're going to talk about today, some of the things, the real challenges that people are having. So, my education has been the last 10 years of just trying to figure out how to help people maximize what they've got, make the best of what they've got. So,
Good stuff. Dr. Brockenshire.
That's me. Hey, Davis Brockenshire, like Dr. Brandon, I'm a chiropractor, but I fell into that by accident because I was in financial planning. And what I realized doing, finances, helping people retire, et cetera, was all of the wealthy people that retired early died early because they were sick. And I said, I'm not helping people. How do I do this? So jumped into medicine because that was my true passion, and developed into this kind of wellness crusader routine where we chase human performance, be the best you can be, hang out with people better than you. Rising tide lifts all ships.
I've heard that mantra.
Yeah, and that's been what I've done my whole life. And then the last couple of years, I've realized that I've been the last one standing. All my mentors have passed on, and so I grabbed the torch, grabbed the baton, stood up and said, all right, how do we share everything we've learned and everything we've forgotten? So while I run a wellness clinic down in the Detroit area, I've been spending most of my time traveling, teaching docs, doing events like this.
Speaking.
Getting the word out, And more importantly, trying to get doctors, licensed healthcare providers to up their game, reach out to their patients, do a better job. Because it's way more fun when you do good work.
It is good.
And so that's the higher calling, is let's all do a little better work, let that critical mass happen, and then maybe more people will want to go into healthcare and not be scared and not be shied away by, oh, it's too much work, it's too hard, I can't do this. You can do everything.
Oh, Brandon had said you're the clinical director for maybe a supplement company?
2 supplement
Two.
companies.
Let me hear that.
Yeah, so clinical advisor for Quicksilver Scientific. You can check them all over Instagram.
Yep.
And then clinical director for Physica Energetics, which is kind of a boutique global company that does doctor-only supplementation.
So some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And what is your role with those?
Executive.
Yep.
When the worst things happen, they ask me what to do next. Or new product development, research integration, education, little business management, choosing colors and fonts and stuff like that.
Sure.
All
I like
aspects of the journey are part of my domain.
Sure. Well, I brought both of you guys a gift, so I was going to give you guys that. This is our Purpose Maker organic coffee.
all right.
So this is my thanks to you guys for spending some time hanging out here today.
Thank you.
That's a fun one. It's an organic blend, so
I happen to have tasted that before, and it is absolutely a fantastic blend.
something really cool. When I first listed that, you were the first one to purchase it.
Yeah, I didn't even
ever.
know that.
So I appreciate that, Brandon.
Yeah, no
Thank you
problem
very
at all.
much.
No, I appreciate that gift, and I guess we got our gifts ready to go.
Yeah, I got my
That's
grinder
it.
out.
Out of here.
The water's boiling. Let's go.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. So, we're going to talk a little bit today about life. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about how this Purpose Maker podcast kind of came. A couple years ago, I did some suicide prevention work with a veteran group. We got to 6,000 people that were in a dangerous time in 1 year. I was on the phone with a lot of people that were having some real questions about being here on this earth. And so I was driving home from this clinic one time, and I just kind of was thinking to myself, man, how could somebody put a gun in their mouth or swallow a bunch of pills and just call it quits? And an image popped into my head, and I call it the TIP method. It stands for transition, identity, and purpose. And I realized that for someone to be at that point, they had to be going through one or multiple major transitions: separation from the military, possibly a divorce, can't find work. These things are adding up. They had a loss of identity and a loss of purpose. And you get that ball rolling, and that is kind of the catalyst that gets that question in someone's head. So what we found out was 98% of people put a social media post up that they're struggling. So we basically designed a program where they could post, and then we had what we would call a battle buddy. Somebody in that area would reach out. So that's kind of the genesis of it. And then for a couple of years, I didn't do too much. My nonprofit acted as an incubator. So we got this program going, and then once we were an incubator for a year, they went on and did their thing. So I kind of just went back to my private practice, didn't think much of it. Last year, 2 people in my practice took their lives. And that's kind of when I was like, I need to start speaking about this, because it's a little more than just talking about health. It's getting a little bit deeper into the psychology and how we think. And I think there's a lot we can do to improve our lives, and that's why I like having people on here to get different ideas. And the midlife wisdom thing kind of came out. One of my mentors uses that LIFE acronym, and that's why the LIFE is LIFE, are the 4 ways that we can improve our lives, and also the 4 ways we can give back through our labor, our influence, our finances, our expertise. And then I define midlife very generously. Basically, you have adolescence, and then you're a young adult, and midlife, or the middle phase of your life, is from young adulthood to the nursing home. That's the middle of your life. You're going to go through more changes than any other phase. Marriages, having kids, parents getting older, businesses. It's a very busy time. So that's kind of the crew we're talking to today, are the business owners and the people that are in that midlife phase. So let's talk a little bit. Let's start with brain health, because I think
It's an easy topic. Let's fire off
that's
there.
right.
Yeah.
Well, so here's how I think about it. I think about the brain being at the top, so we could just move our way down. That's kind of how I'm coming with that.
No, I like that, and I think this panel is pretty unique in that we all have a common interest in improving the human situation, but we go at it a couple of different ways, and many of the similar ways. But in the end, what we're looking at here is maximizing that function, your brain being the control center of your body. And so how do we address that? So we're definitely going to hop into that and learn some pretty cool stuff.
Sure.
I just got back from Orlando, where I was asked to teach a 2-hour lecture to a room full of cardiologists about the brain.
Interesting.
You mentioned top down, but ironically, without circulation, the brain's dead.
That is true.
So the osteopaths used to joke, hey man, it's all about blood flow. And then the chiropractor's like, no bro, it's all about nerve flow. And what we learned is it's both, because you can't have one without the other.
Right.
But in our research, we've found that if you focus on circulation, you can do anything to the brain. But if all you look at is the brain and you ignore circulation, then you never get where you need to be. And the latest research on mental illness shows that it's actually rooted in arterial health, inflammation, microbiome, and microcirculation. Which makes sense, because when you're dying of the flu, you're not in a good mood.
No.
But circulation's compromised.
Right.
Somebody has a good workout, or a hot night of sex, or you do some burpees, and you've got all that blood flow going, you feel better.
Right.
So that's the old adage, no matter how bad you feel, if you can get up and go for a walk, you can get the blood moving,
get
clear
things
your
going.
head. Yeah. Fascinating research topic that we could just, annex one day and do hours on.
Let's let's talk about brain inflammation then. That's interesting. So you're saying the gut biome
Yeah.
has an effect on that?
Absolutely. We've got receptor sites in our brain cells for bacteria and bacterial metabolites. So they used to think Alzheimer's, was a plaquing thing and your brain got tangled. But
Amyloids, isn't that
yeah,
it? Yep.
they measured that after you were dead. Well, that doesn't help. So what you got to understand is those plaquings formed because your immune system was responding to something, usually bacterial, virus, Lyme, like a spirochete, sometimes mold. And the microbiome is trying to talk to the brain to tell them everything it's okay. And the brain is saying, no, something wrong, not okay, fix now. Because the brain has to use short language.
Yeah.
And the gut is where everything is dynamic, So the language of the microbiome is very elegant. And there's a lot of belly up communication. But if you've had a traumatic brain injury of any kind.
I have 3 patients with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've had 14. Brandon, I know you've had a few because we've worked on them.
We got some doozies.
Wait, Brandon has a brain injury.
That's why he knows so much.
Yeah,
about it.
I mean, yeah.
Yes, it is.
But when you experience the trauma to the brain, and trauma can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be chemical. And I've worked with a lot of SEALs out of Coronado. We see a lot of that chemical trauma. The microbiome freezes when the brain is injured. It goes into like this emergency mode. And so if you're working on the brain to try and recover the injury without working on the microbiome, you never get them better. But if you start with the microbiome and allow the brain to come around, they'll have a few die-off events. They'll be in the bathroom wishing they would put the toilet paper in the freezer because they're having drama. But that's how you eliminate, reset the brain. And a lot of people we've noticed who get things like food poisoning have a different mental outlook after, because they've eliminated that microbiome, which is actually creating some self-limiting beliefs that they had.
Interesting.
So the question is it really our brain that gives us personality or the bugs in our belly?
Which has been a whole bunch of research showing that possibly your brain or your gut has more control of your brain than your brain does your gut.
Sure.
So, and it is. And I've seen it in my practice where, like you're saying, you have to address the gut or you're just getting into this cycle that's just repeats itself over and over again.
So what symptoms do you see in a patient that you need to address the gut?
We can be anything from, depressive disorders. I see a lot of closed head injuries because of some tech that he introduced me to. But really it comes full circle what we're talking about, the inflammatory process that causes maybe some personality defects, like I said, the depression, things of that nature, bad headaches. Oftentimes, and I'm sure, at least you probably find this too, is that, if you start drilling down into them, taking a good history, they just lay it out for you. Oh, by the way, that one time when I was partying in Cancun, I got a really bad bug. I was sick for 3 weeks. Now, to them, that doesn't mean anything. That's a pearl for you.
Right. So, Doc, what do you look for?
Oh, I asked them if their mom dropped them on their head when they were a kid. He usually answers yes.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Or their brother hit him in the head with a shovel.
Oh.
Or our friend got hit in the head with an axe. Things happen.
Sure.
But you forget about it as you get older. And you bring up a good point about midlife. I find that midlife is kind of where all of the injuries and experiences of your past come to that nexus or that still point. And then you have to make those work for you or do some deep work on yourself to kind of move through them.
Sure.
But, Brandon mentioned tech. We use this thing called the Wavy Brain Scanner, which is an EEG device, and we're able to see anxiety, depression, ADHD, OCD, sleep dysfunction, prior history of concussion, kind of look at it to, catch Alzheimer's before it happens. And I'm playing with it right now to try and see where Parkinson's and Parkinsonism is going to fit in. But you ask for symptoms. One of the hallmark symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic brain injury, and CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, is anxiety and depression, going into suicidal tendencies. And what I find really cool, and just jump to parasitology here, the bug toxoplasmosis, which comes from kitty cats. So if you got a litter box in your house, you probably have toxoplasmosis in your brain. That one parasite can also mimic a lot of the symptoms of brain injury, anxiety, depression, all of that. So if you're seeing people all of a sudden taking more risks than normal, like recently there was a drug for restless leg syndrome that apparently causes really high risk sexual behavior in older women. I'm like, well, that's a neat side effect. How does that work?
Right.
But
It's shutting off something in the
it's
brain.
changing dopamine receptor
Yeah.
activity. And there's, Mrs. Doubtfire out on the street at 2 a.m. looking for love. And she's like, I don't know why I'm doing this.
Can't control it.
But it's the same mechanism. So we have all of these signs and symptoms in our world of science. And as practitioners, we're trying to work on it one-on-one, trying to understand the human condition. So at the end of the day, everything can cause anything. As one of my old mentors used to say, we got to look with better eyes, hear with better ears, work with better hands, and just sit down and listen. Look at your client. Talk to them. Be present. Don't stare at your iPad wondering, wait a minute, this isn't a girl.
It's a skill that's lost in doctoring.
Yeah.
Well, we used the Wavi with Brandon. My daughter had an accident off of her horse and had a brain injury.
Yeah.
And we did that. And then we did some mushroom supplements, if I remember right.
Yeah, some of the ones we talked about
Yep.
last year
Yep.
mostly focus on lion's mane.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, one of the things he's talking about that Wavi EEG, and one of the things that's done for me is I think it was a big conceptual leap for a lot of people to be able to say, hey, listen, I know you feel like you're experiencing this cognitive decline. Let's see for one, so we can actually test to see if that's going on. But it's quite easy actually to then use that tech to explain to them how actually your heart, we're talking about the blood pressure thing, your heart is actually not oxygenating your brain properly, and you may not have the head injury you think. But it's a very key part of it that, like I said, you're stuck in that circle if you don't address that. So, and I mean, the beautiful thing about that too was with your daughter Hope, we were able to document, here is an injured brain.
Oh, sure.
Here is a healed brain. You can't argue with that, and she can't game that system.
Right.
So,
No, it was a good test.
Yeah, so I've had people use it for that, but much to my surprise, and I know you had this, where you have that patient that's in their late 60s, early 70s, now it seems 40s and 50s, that like, I think I'm declining, but they want to know. We can do that. And the uniqueness of this EEG is that it is a functional test. It doesn't care what your brain's doing while you're resting. What's it doing while you're working? So
Sure.
we're using auditory, visual, combining all the senses to test how's your brain working at work, how is it at rest, different things. So it really runs the brain through all the exercises that you'd want to see.
Do you guys run all your patients through the Wavi?
Practically.
Yeah. I'm getting closer to that. We've really done a lot of retooling, and as both of you know, with retooling comes a lot of, I didn't expect that, and but yeah, we're getting a really good system down, and part of what we do is having the confidence to understand the patient is going to benefit from this. All things aside, you need this, so I can help you. And so once we get through that, it's amazing technology that's made some huge differences, and it's really, truly, it's something that's not being done on a large scale.
Right.
Wish it was.
Have you picked up Parkinson's on a Wavi scan?
I'm starting to see what looks like a Parkinson's pattern.
Okay.
And it's still in the works. I'm trying to, make it
Trying to figure it out.
Evidence-based,
Yep.
not just a fluke. I don't like seeing Parkinson's patients because it's kind of the end stage of a situation, but there's a lot we can do for it. And recently, there's been a connection between fatty liver and liver disease and dementia. And so if you've got metabolic syndrome or you have fatty liver and AFLD, you're going to have neurologic decline.
Sure.
And like Brandon says, the client says, hey, I'm kind of worried here. I think something's up. It's like, well, that's because you've been sober for 2 hours. Oh, yeah, I feel better when I drink.
That's not a good thing.
That's not a good sign. So we've got inflammation in the liver, which is driving mood.
Right.
And one of the questions I always have for psychologists is, do you study the brain? If you're a doctor of the brain, do you study it? If you're a cardiologist, did you study the heart? If you're an orthopedic surgeon, you study the bones and the joints, but the psychologists really study the mind. And one of the hardest things we have in practice is, how do we measure a broken heart? What does that look like? Because that's usually when trouble starts. They never think they're going to feel good again. Their life is over. their chest is heavy. There's just no point. I mean, what's the point? Honestly, who cares?
Right.
And we can measure that with heart rate variability and other technologies, and we'll see that. And I call it, their bucket of love. It's empty.
It's empty. Yeah.
And so if you don't have any joy in your life, what's the point? And when you talk to them about that, they're like, finally somebody gets it. Honestly, what's the point? Why am I even here?
I've heard that question before.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a dopamine dysfunction. We're all dopamine addicts, but dopamine starts in the gut. Not on TikTok, not on Instagram. It starts with conditioning that bed of good bugs in your belly.
Right. On the Parkinson's stuff, and the reason I'm asking these questions, I have a few patients with it. Are you seeing the main issue in the cerebellum? Where's
usually frontal temporal, but we'll see a lot of dysfunction in the temporal lobes.
Okay.
Complete lack of current. So on the Wabi, the T5 and the T6 zones, temporal zones, are flat. There's no current whatsoever.
So there's basically little brain activity.
In those zones, yeah. So it's a complete loss of control. They've run out of stress management. But our main approach is detox.
Detox them.
Yeah, we know that metals, we know that environmental chemicals, and more importantly, this new science of endotoxins, which are the poisons our body actually makes in response to other poisons. 'Cause, we're weird as mammals. If you have that gut inflammation, if you've got heartburn or weird, bowel habits in the middle of the night, that's a sign that your body can't handle the inflammation from what you're trying to manage. So we can target a specific chemical and just call out glyphosate for what it is, the modern scourge on our brains and our bellies. And if we don't do a better push on eliminating Roundup from North America, there's not going to be anybody left to fight. Roundup causes Parkinson's. Mercury causes Parkinson's. Cadmium causes Parkinson's. You know what else? Gluten can cause Parkinson's in a lot of people.
Sure, they're very sensitive.
They react. We're all sensitive to stuff, but some people just react more than others because they're unique. So I think going forward in medicine, we're really going to be able to embrace this idea of bio-individuality. And chiropractic, we've done that forever.
Right.
Everybody's unique. Everybody's going to get a unique treatment, and it evolves as the treatment plan goes. It's not the same thing over and over and over. There's always a slight twist,
Little
right?
change, yeah.
It's like your bartender of health. I like the way you make martinis, man.
Right.
No, I don't want the other guy.
Yeah.
Extra espresso in the martini.
Well, you had mentioned the fatty liver. So they're now finding that the GLP-1, that's one of the side effects of it. And I had talked about this on another podcast too. The GLP-1, when you got Ozempic and Wegovy and there's a whole host of them.
Tirzepatide.
Yeah.
They have a box warning on them from the FDA being one of the most side effect causing medications you could be on. Excuse me. And the other thing that they increase is thyroid cancer, which is, that's scary because I think the latest numbers say 62 million people are on GLP-1s.
Pancreas doesn't like it either. Not one bit.
Have you had people with pancreatitis or?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So nowadays it's hard to figure out what's COVID and, post-COVID and all that stuff, which maybe we go there and we don't. But, without a question. And so it's just, in the end, what we're seeing here is a complete change of people. So what used to make us look cool, not so cool anymore. So we're reinventing ourselves, but we're keeping up with it. But, so you brought back that liver thing, and so I've been thinking since you said that. Now, we know that like statin drugs change how your body utilizes fats. We know that they're implicated in neurodegenerative diseases. So you start talking about the liver, and of course we know liver's relationship with the cholesterol, how we use it, and cholesterol deposition and whatnot. So now I see another layer of, now we have another organ that's involved in this. It's not just the cholesterol lowering meds, so the statin meds and stuff like that. So
Right.
it just really gets more complicated.
Sure.
So interesting.
Well, asking these cardiologists about brain health, I opened with, know your organ. You guys are heart experts. So I asked them about cholesterol, and they looked at me funny. I said, cholesterol, you guys work with this all day long. And they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. cholesterol. Oh, yeah. No, it's cholesterol. Chole for liver gallbladder. Bile-derived sterol hormone. Oh, it's a bile hormone. Wait, cholesterol's a hormone? Yep. Can't make a hormone without it.
Right.
Wink, wink. So, if you have hormonal issues, you better check to see if you can make cholesterol. But this cholesterol piece, they immediately think, well, that causes heart disease. No, it doesn't. Inflammation drives the deposition of cholesterol.
Sure.
Well, what we've just recently discovered, we'll call it science because science is like opinion right now, changes every week. These ideas around immunological senescence, or where your cells get tired, they get lazy, they get fat, they get bloated, they stick together. These senescent cells stop working for you and they attract infection. So all plaquing in the body, whether it's in the teeth, the arteries, the brain, the bones, by the way, plaquing in the bones looks like bone spurs. All of that can be derived from some source of infection, something like a Lyme co-infection or a dental infection. And if you think about the bugs in the mouth, mimic the bugs in the belly. So any intestinal problem's also going to have a dental problem. Hey, we just solved something there.
We did. Hey, look at that. Write that down.
Write that down. Yeah. So I asked people, let's do a microbiome study on the mouth. So they spit in a tube, we send it out, and sure enough, you'll see runaway bacteria like gingivalis. And we know for a fact that these bacteria in the mouth, the same bacteria that cause gingivitis, will cause plaquing of the heart valves.
That's the connection between oral health and heart health. Yeah.
So with that, then you look at, hey, did you ever have an injury to your heart or a blood vessel? You and I have had injuries to our carotid arteries several times. But what about injuries to the blood vessels in the brain? The body fixes it, it repairs it, but if there was infection, it repaired it hastily, and so it's lumpy and clumpy.
Right.
And it uses cholesterol to repair it. So this mental illness story could also be an infection story, could be a cholesterol story, but since you brought it up, Brandon, the number one symptom of low cholesterol is psychosis.
Oh, interesting.
So if your cholesterol is under 130 units, you're prone to psychosis.
Total cholesterol you're talking?
Total cholesterol.
Wow.
Yeah.
Regardless of triglyceride, HDL.
Regardless.
Okay.
Yeah,
What was that number?
130.
Oh, man. Thanks.
Oh, man, you're welcome.
What you just did to me.
What are you at, 131?
No, it's not me. I'm now going through all the labs.
Yeah.
Right?
Thinking
Made
of
my job more
It's a
fun.
good doctor.
good. So what about if the cholesterol is high? So here's a question I got this week. Patient's a vegetarian, probably early 60s. Cholesterol is 250. And I was telling them basically the way I thought about it is 80% of cholesterol is controlled by the liver, 20% by nutrition. So something else is causing that cholesterol to elevate. Talk me through that situation.
Inflammation.
Yeah, inflammation, but
Yeah.
you got genetic components, and you've got a 60-year-old female vegetarian. I'm going to question her thyroid. So one of the first symptoms of thyroid dysfunction is high cholesterol, typically LDL. But then that begs the question, well, what is high? So we have a 250 total. We don't have much else. She's 60, so we're postmenopausal. Her body's probably trying to make some hormones. She's probably looking for a pregnenolone. So she's going to make more cholesterol to try and make more pregnenolone to make DHEA and testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. She's going to try her damnedest to make hormones.
Right.
And it's a sign that, there's some missing support. So definitely check the thyroid first. Run a full thyroid panel. Look at reverse T3, TPO antibodies, the works.
Sure.
And clinical pearl, if your reverse T3 is elevated, it's a stress-induced problem. So now we got to look at PTSD, what are you going through? All of these things can be measured.
That'll elevate some thyroid?
It'll elevate reverse T3.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, if you don't test, you guess. And a really good doctor has really good guesses, but you still test.
Sure. Testing's good.
And I've seen so many women over 60 when they'll have a stressful event. Let's say their grandchild gets sick or the husband dies or something. Their thyroid crashes. That was the last straw. And you'll see their cholesterol go up. So lowering it is actually impairing the body's ability to protect itself.
Right. Yeah, because I've always thought cholesterol helps heal.
It is. That's our healing compound. It's like drywall putty.
Yeah.
Yeah, spackles the walls.
So is there any understanding that too much of it can cause a problem?
Totally.
Yeah.
When I look at numbers, if we're going over 300 on a regular basis, your LDL is sitting over 200, and you have some genetic markers, then yeah, we need to manage that. And there's some botanicals we can use. But
Look at vascular inflammation.
yeah, where's the trauma?
So where's the inflammation? What's causing the inflammation?
70% comes from the gut.
Let's talk about a cell that's inflamed and it's going through it. What is causing that cell inflammation? Is it an immune response? Yeah. So it's a low-grade immune response that doesn't shut off?
Yeah, and which is autoimmune disease, which
Sure.
cardiovascular disease, CVD, is autoimmune disease. And we can measure all of that today with modern functional medical testing.
Right.
And more importantly, do something about it. But if you've had a brain injury, your brain is telling the body, keep fixing, keep fixing, keep fixing. And until you've addressed the brain injury, you're not going to get anywhere. And most heart disease can be traced back to some other brain injury. So if you've got before and after labs, my cholesterol was great until I had surgery, I had a baby, I was in a car accident.
Yeah.
You know?
And it just
Traumatic
triggers that immune. Yep.
Yeah.
So if we're going through all that, and you're talking about earlier, you had mentioned some blood flow to the brain and stuff. I teach my patients this all the time. The vertebral artery is housed and protected inside the spine. Comes up the spine, wraps under the occiput, and then links into the circle of Willis. The curvature in your neck has an impact on how much blood you're getting to the deep part of your brain. And all of my patients hear me talk about this all the time. And basically what I say, it's kind of like, think about the vertebral artery like a rubber band. And the more you stretch it, the cross-section or the diameter decreases, decreasing that blood volume. So I hit it from that angle quite a bit. Other than that and exercise, what are other ways you're talking to patients about improving blood flow to the brain?
Nitric oxide. You can measure nitric oxide with a salivary strip.
Yep.
And if it's low, you want to support things like nitrates, herbs like hawthorn, the amino acid citrulline, which is better than arginine, by the way, because arginine turns into other proteins. But if you use citrulline, it's just going to turn into nitric oxide. And there's this seaweed extract called Rhamnox, or rhamnous sulfate, which has been proven to repair the lining of the arteries. And there's been a lot of work on stroke, particularly with the vertebral artery and the carotid artery. Not because the chiropractors did anything wrong. It's usually because they got kicked funny in jiu-jitsu, and there's trauma to the artery. But you know, those can be put all together in a cocktail. The simplest thing you can do is drink some water. Because if you're dehydrated and your blood volume's down, your arteries get tight.
Sure.
So open them up. Eat some real food. Have some B vitamins.
Speaking of jiu-jitsu, I trained for 2 years. Loved it. The injury rate of some of my other friends that did it was unbelievable. I saw a torn ACL right in front of me, a couple of shoulder injuries. I got a couple of the guys into the clinic here, and the x-rays are unbelievable. That's the major thing that made me back off, was looking at some of these spines and going, okay, so you're trained so long, you can protect yourself in a situation, but you've just now taken 20 years off your life. When I stopped training, my neck was sore for a year after. So,
As a chiropractor.
yeah, and I was
really
like,
bad advertising.
what, the jiu-jitsu?
No, for you to have a sore neck.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm telling you why it was sore.
No,
I
I
mean,
know
I
what
knew
you're
it.
saying.
I used to come home after training and I literally couldn't turn.
Yep.
Like I would just kind of walk around, and that's how it was. And that was when I was like, all right, the cost benefit of this is not worth it, right? So
There's always Muay Thai.
there's other things. But when you're talking about vascular injury, what is most of jiu-jitsu? I mean, it's literally choking people out, which is cutting off the blood supply to the brain.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I started struggling with training, and then understanding the clinical application of the results of doing that.
Tell you, once you know, it really limits your activity.
Mm-hmm.
Once you know you're doing something that's, terribly destructive.
You don't motocross race anymore?
Well,
No, he specializes in coming off his motorcycle.
yeah, we talked.
Superman.
I'm an ejection specialist.
Ejection.
Yeah, no, so everyone knows I don't ride dirt bikes anymore. I got bit hard about a year and a half ago. I think we talked about that a little bit.
I was probably one of the first ones to get the pictures
Oh yeah, I was sitting on the ground, not looking happy.
over the handlebars.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that was a bad one. But it's funny too. But you learn from things like that, and throughout the course of my life, I would say I've had a lot of little things happen, that kind of set me back. But there's two major things. We talked about my cancer, and then that crash actually had almost the same effect on me, because the things that I learned from taking care of myself and regaining my health, I can now apply, and it's pretty amazing. So, you're talking about some of those compounds and stuff like that to deal with inflammation. I think it's a really important point right now, because a lot of people don't know this. My patients are amazed when I tell them this. It's like, they wonder why herbs work, why food works. Well, first of all, we have receptors to use it, so that's helpful. But beyond that, almost every drug they're taking was modeled as closely as possible to some sort of an element of a plant that we use. So, and they only do that so they can patent it. So the magic is in the plants, it's in the herbs, it's in the food, it's the things that we need for us to live.
Sure.
And that's quite an epiphany for some people.
Whitey, would you mind sharing your story again? I know.
Only if you don't call me by my nickname again. Now everyone knows. Yeah. So, last time it got really long-winded, so maybe I'll condense it a little bit in the interest of saying, go watch the other one. No, so basically I had just finished a pretty successful career, graduated from Palmer. I was playing men's Super League and Major League Rugby. We had a really good team. You remember you were playing for a while.
Yep.
And I would have to say I really was on top of the world. And to set the stage for this, I was voted most fit person on the team, and there was a bunch of studs on the team. So, and you remember I could outrun everybody in the mile.
Yep.
So, having said that, about 1 year into practice, things were absolutely booming, and I was starting to get really fatigued, which was odd for me. I was the Energizer Bunny. But I justified it. I was building a new Jeep. I had just moved back. All my buddies, practice was booming and stuff like that. And ultimately, it took me down to the point where I was convinced, because I wasn't smart enough to do it myself, to go and see a doctor. And so when I did, I was diagnosed with a pretty advanced and unusual form of acute lymphocytic leukemia. So I was raised by a chiropractor that I will say now fortunately taught me to fear medicine. And I'm not anti-medicine, it has its place, but I had a fear that made me respect my body enough to look at other things. And so I was faced with, you have almost no chance to live. They gave me very little time to live, really, no matter what I did. And I made the personal decision after talking to my family. Originally, I said, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to change my lifestyle. If I die, it's my time. And then people that cared about me a lot intervened, and I can now say they gave me really good advice. So I would say at the time, against my judgment, maybe even my will, I agreed to do chemotherapy. Now, from that moment on, I can't say I made a bad move, because I'm here and I'm doing well.
Sure.
And I can't say I'd do it different, because I can't imagine being where I am now. So I went through the chemo. I ended up like many do. I contracted pneumonia while I was in Munson Medical Center, the local hospital. And that almost killed me. I was on intubated, as far as I understand, although of course I don't remember it. That my mom had the priest come and kind of ready to do the last rites thing. So, and a little aside, you guys think you got a great mom. I got the best mom in the world. She never left my bedside for 4 or 5 days while I was in ICU.
Sure.
That's what moms do.
Yes, it
so
is.
I came out of that. So interestingly enough, because you guys know me, when my eyes came open, my mom was, of course, crying, loving on me and everything. Oh, I'm so glad you came back too and everything. And apparently one of the very first things I said was like, Mom, chill. I was just faking it. But I started gaining a bunch of momentum after that. I kind of regained my health. Now I was down. I lost 75 pounds within a couple of weeks when that whole thing started. So definitely I took a huge hit. And one of the things that I talked about last time that they have to do for chemotherapy to work is completely eliminate to the best of their ability your immune system. That's a problem for healing.
Yeah. So how do they do that?
Well, they use it. That's what chemotherapy drugs do.
Drop the
So
immune system down.
yeah, basically what they were trying to do. This is more for my bone marrow transplant I subsequently had, but they kind of have to get the white blood cells out of the way. That's what they use is lab testing to see, all right, we don't see any white blood cells, you're good to go. Because otherwise you'll have that rejection reaction. So, but I was gaining a bunch of momentum, and it was the summertime, and anybody that's ever been to Traverse City, Michigan knows that we suffer through the winters because it's one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yeah.
So it's summertime, we have this thing called Cherry Festival, and I honestly, I can look at you guys and say I never thought I was going to die, but there's always that thought, what if? So I ended up very quickly, because of the severity of my diagnosis, I went to the very top of the National Bone Marrow Registry to become a bone marrow recipient. And I got a 10 out of 10 match, a perfect match really early on. And so I really didn't want to do the bone marrow transplant, but they told me that if I relapsed, they had nothing for me and I'd probably die. And there was, 80-90% chance I'd relapse. So I made the decision that I was going to do the bone marrow transplant. I really quickly got a 10 out of 10 match, and they were set me up to go down to Detroit to the Barbara Ann Carmanos Cancer Center to do a bone marrow transplant. Well, I started to get cold feet a little bit. And so about a week before the bone marrow transplant, which would have happened over said Cherry Festival, I was supposed to go down to do it, and I called them about a week before, and I said, I can't do it, I'm not coming. And I never gave them a reason why, I just said I'm not doing it. And in all transparency, the reason was just in case I died, I needed to party one more Cherry Festival. So mind you, the aspect of rebuilding my health was foreign to me at that point. I was still being self-destructive, which I truly believe is why I was where I was. So anyway, they told me, well, your donor backed out. I was like, okay, can we find another one? So they did find another one, but it was a 9 out of 10 match, which means not perfect. And what came of that was a thing called graft versus host disease. It'd be very similar to like you get a kidney transplant, your body rejects the kidney. Now, essentially, I was getting a new immune system. So with a new immune system, there's nothing off the table. It's like Lyme, right? So there's nothing off the table, and all kinds of weird stuff happened. So I had really bad graft versus host disease, and so some of the things that happened to me, now I know what it was. I had thrush on the side of my tongue that was so bad I couldn't eat, so they cut the side of my tongue off. The bottoms of my feet fell off, the soles of my feet. And my girlfriend at the time was so grossed off about this. I peeled them off and I set them on my nightstand. And it looked like insoles sitting there. So, but I mean, that was a rough time. I couldn't walk on carpet for a few days, even carpet. So it just kind of went through all that stuff, had some major skin issues, eye issues, stuff like that. But one of the things that was key that I talked about last time, so I won't go real deep into it, was I always had this idea, because the first drug that had ever gone through my body was chemotherapy. Might as well do it right. I had this knowledge, I guess, that you can have an incredible healthy life without drugs. And so at that time when they gave me hey, we have engraftment, which means it worked, here, congratulations, boo, rah, rah, whatever. Oh, by the way, you're going to take all these drugs for the rest of your life. And I said, no, I'm not. You need to get me off these. So they wouldn't do it. So I threw them all away. Don't do that. And all of a sudden, I'm home in Traverse City sitting in my recliner, and I really had oh shit, what do I do now? So I was forced, because I'm a baptism by fire guy, I was forced to start going down this road of this stupid conceptual leap I made. I wonder if food and herbs could have to help to heal me and make me better. So there was a standard process supplement company. Angelo Agon's his name. He's a very dear friend of mine. You know him really well. Super good dude. He took me under his wing, and he started to give me some momentum that it was like, you know what, I think there is something here. And I started to gain just a little bit of momentum, a little bit more momentum. And it got to where I was like, okay, there is something here. Now, I'm really speeding through this because this is a year and a half basically where I was out of work. I actually was a professional truck driver for a minute to make some money. That didn't go well.
You look the part.
I did. I had
Yeah.
my trucker hat and everything. They squared off bill.
Yeah.
So I thought about taking up chewing, but that was way too far. So anyway, we ended up. I did end up getting back to work, but I really, because I was feeling better gradually, it really grabbed me that there was something more than chiropractic that I could offer people that was pretty unique, that I really thought could improve their health. And so a lot of things happened along the way, but there was a very pivotal thing, and that's why I am so honored to be sitting next to you. I went to a lot of speakers. That's where I got a lot of my continuing educational credits to keep my chiropractic license up. I went to a lot of nutrition seminars. And I just happened to go to this one with this guy with this goofy name, Davis Brockenshire, and it just spoke to me. And so if you ever see him speak, it's an amazing skill. I don't know if you know this about you. You can make eye contact with every single person in that room all at once. And so you're speaking to every person, and it spoke to me. And the information that you gave me blew my mind. So I started to work on that, and I went through a few different seminars of his. And then I walked up to him one time after a seminar, and I said, hey, brief overview. I had cancer, blah, blah, blah. I told him a very brief form of what I did. What should I do? I'm having these problems. And he gave me a couple of things to do, and it was the biggest push forward that I ever had. So I was like, interesting. So then some months later, I go to another one of his seminars, and at a break, I go walking up to him, and I was going to go up there and tell him, hey, thanks for the advice, what now type of thing. And he looks at me and he goes, cancer guy. I was like, oh, you remember me. It's, Brandon, but we're good with that. So anyway, and it was really interesting because then, and I still don't know how it happened. You are my mentor. You've taught me most of what I know, and I value that so much. But deeper than that, I'm sitting in this room with two of my closest friends, and just having this jam session. So this is so important to me, and for different reasons. You two guys are a big, big part of me being able to be here. So I really appreciate that, and I've learned so much from both of you.
Well, thank
for
you.
Different reasons.
Yep.
So I do still have a sore back from carrying you through college.
That is true.
Over that.
When I call his office, I always tell him his mentor's calling.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Of which I tell him hold the call.
Yep. Yep.
Pretty often.
So, Dr. Brockenshire, do you remember about how long ago that was that you guys met?
Ooh, like 2012, 2013.
Yeah, I think somewhere
Because
around
then we hung out in Traverse City in 2014
Yeah.
at the Grand Traverse event.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
been a
that
while.
sounds about right.
yeah.
So, do you remember the seminar you're doing? Well,
Yeah, back then I was talking about cloaked infections and how they can mimic everything, including ALL and CLL, leukemia forms, and we talked about, I think I got down and dirty on Lyme and mycotoxins and mycoplasmas.
so
And that just started, nobody was talking about it then. Now everything's a bioweapon.
right.
But, we got into it, and we went over your protocol. I remember where you were sitting in that room, and there were a couple of the naturopaths in the room, too, who were kind of into it. And we talked about things like artemisinin and how the Chinese were using that for pretty much everything, including malaria, STDs, you name it. So I think we built your protocol more of a herbal protocol, and then you develop it from there. But I don't know any other human on the planet that's had more turmeric than this guy. He wouldn't have a spleen if he didn't.
It's true.
And it's seriously like not telling stories out of school, but
Right.
he's the turmeric wizard. That's why we call him Obi-Wan when it comes to curcuminoids.
That motorcycle crash we talked about a little bit ago, I also ruptured my spleen. Didn't
Oh,
know
yeah.
it. Yeah, didn't know it. I found out 18 days later when I went to the ER.
With side pain?
Yeah, I just got really nervous, and so every chiropractor does this. You're injured, so you don't go to the ER. You go use your X-ray machine to see if you're really injured.
Sure.
So now, of course, we all know that you don't diagnose soft tissue injuries with X-ray, but I had my
You could see it?
I had my office manager take an X-ray and sitting right over my spleen. I was like, well, I'm not gassy, and that doesn't look good.
Right.
So I suspected I had a bleed, and it was a pretty comical situation in the ER when the MD, the trauma surgeon in the ER, when both of us realized that we both learned something, and that was that because of my disregard for my health, a spleen can heal. And he learned that a spleen could heal because he normally would have cut it out.
So by the time you got there, your spleen was healed?
Yeah, that's what he said. And that was exactly what he said. Because due to your complete disregard for your well-being, your spleen definitely
Wait, your body did what it was supposed to do?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he said, so your spleen was definitely bleeding, and had you come in 18 days ago when you crashed,
They would have taken it out.
I would have taken your spleen out. And I was
Sure.
like, well, great, I get to keep my spleen then.
So what's the spleen's main function?
It's an immune organ. So one of its main things it does, and that's what I had a big issue with my spleen, because it basically filters out, keeps your blood chemistry healthy. So, and leukemias generally will manifest themselves with some sort of a spleen issue, and that's how I knew. That's the
Sure.
thing. Has been over in pain.
So what's the difference from the spleen and the gallbladder?
Oh, man.
Size, color.
Yep.
The spleen is the recycling plant for blood cells. So
Okay.
as you are done with the red blood cell, it breaks them down and you reuse the parts. I mean, that's good innate wisdom. But the gallbladder is just a bag under autonomic control, and it just holds bile. And the bile is made by the liver. And so when you need the bile, the gallbladder squeezes it out through a valve, and you get to digest fat or detox.
Yeah, emulsifies the fats. Yeah.
So don't lose your gallbladder.
That's another thing to tie into this.
I've
We're
had
talking about neurodegenerative. Talk about managing your fats when you don't have a gallbladder.
Yeah.
I've seen that together so many times, and it makes everything more difficult.
So why I've had some young patients have their gallbladders removed. What's the main reason?
Pain. They'll do a test, and a lot of times the tests don't show any dysfunction, but the pain is so bad, so they remove it.
What's causing that?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's where
You
I
wanna
want to
go
go.
there?
Yeah,
Why do you
we
see
do.
it mostly in young women? What's the old acronym, right? Fat, fair, female, over 40, and flatulent. Those are the 5 Fs that we can't talk about now because it's not nice. But if that's you and you have epigastric pain, it's usually gallbladder. So we got hormonal dysfunction. Usually iodine is an issue. So they got weak thyroids and they eat all the wrong fats. So for the, way back in the 80s and the 90s when we had margarine and they were deep frying everything in trans fats, that just turned your gallbladder into gel.
Wow.
But in naturopathic medicine, when you see gallbladder stasis, there's going to be a neurologic component, but also a parasitic component. Often those little bugs, like you're out water skiing or jet skiing, and you got a mouthful of lake water when you were 4, and then 20 years later, your gallbladder comes out. Those bugs, they just hang out. So you get a HIDA scan done, or you get some other testing. You've got sand in the gallbladder, you've got gallstones.
Oh.
Nobody wants a stone to get stuck because that's emergency surgery. We avoid emergency surgery. But if you eat a very bland Western type diet, you're not getting the phytochemicals you need to stimulate bile flow. So you mentioned GLP-1 earlier. Well, berberine, which comes from plants like Indian barberry or philodendron, that stimulates bile flow. And there's a lot of other foods like turmeric, as a spice, cinnamon as a spice. They stimulate bile flow, but we don't eat those.
Right.
So I
Not
say,
common.
Yes, add some spice to your life, man.
What does GLP-1 do? Do either one of you know? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Glucagon-like peptide 1.
Yep.
It's been studied for a long time, and now that we have medications that can drive it, these are agonists. So they're like, hey, let's get it going. Basically, you don't want to eat when you take these things, and your brain's like, yeah, okay, you don't need to eat. And so when you're not eating, normally your brain says, uh-oh, we're running out of food, slow the metabolism down, build fat cells. The GLP-1 drugs don't let that happen.
Bypasses that.
So your brain is like, everything looks good to me, but your metabolism is saying, your endocrine system's going, I need fuel. So you lose the appetite reflex, you start to burn fat, and the reason we have so many side effects is so many people are horribly fat toxic. So their fat cells are full of environmental toxins.
Oh, yeah.
That's where we store stuff as mammals.
Sure.
Right? That's why you don't want to eat polar bear, because there's a lot of reasons you don't eat polar bear, but it's toxic.
They're mean.
And they're mean. Save the polar bear. But anyways, don't eat people. But as you see these morbidly obese people leaking that toxic fat into their system, their organs have no way to manage it because the brain's supposed to manage it. So the liver, the gallbladder, the kidneys, they're like, something wrong, too much goop, nowhere to go, and you're constipated. So you end up with gastroparesis, constipation, severe stomach pain. The thyroid's freaking out because the thyroid's poisoned with things like cadmium and chlorine. And so you get thyroid cancer.
Sure.
And when you disrupt the body's natural rhythm of maintenance, bad things happen. However, there are ways to make it work. So if you have a severe morbid obesity and you know you're not going to last that long on this planet, you can use the drugs if you use natural medicine and rational pragmatic thinking to help the body eliminate those poisons. So get in a sauna, hyperhydrate, get an IV, look at a colonic, go for a walk.
Sure.
If you can
Trying to detox.
yeah, manage the reaction your body's going to do innately and help it do it. Get adjusted. I mean, you can get adjusted every day if you're on a GLP-1 because that's going to promote lymphatic drainage.
Sure. What about brain fog from that stuff?
Because of the, we kind of skipped over the neuroinflammation.
Yeah,
but yeah, as you're
hit it.
draining your fat cells,
Yeah.
it slugs up your lymphatic system, which then slugs up your glymphatic system in the brain. Now you can't sleep. Your brain's full of goo. And you're wondering what's wrong with you. And then you have mood disorders. You don't think you're ever going to feel good again. So you got to get deep sleep. At least 20% of your sleep is deep. And you want to upregulate things like glutathione, which you can get as a supplement. It's got to be done in a liposome if it's going to work right. But there is another compound that's hot to trot and new to the Western world, and it's called ergothioneine, which is a mushroom extract. And you can get that in liposomal form and powder form. But the nice thing about ergo is it kind of fixes everything. It's called vitamin L for longevity. And it's my superhero in the nutritional landscape because it will only go where it's needed. Which is like, Cain, the monk, walking through the wilderness, going where I need it. And when you give ergo to people on GLP-1s, it goes right to the organs that have the most drama, which is usually the kidneys. And so chemically it's an antioxidant, but it works at a cellular level. So it helps the cells do their job, and we can store it. So we can saturate ergo for up to 5 days. And that's why when you look at the blue zones around the world, people that live to 100 and actually enjoy living to 100, they're not
good longevity
existing in a home.
Right.
They have the highest levels of ergothioneine because their diet is rich in mushrooms, in grain that was grown in rich soil. Ergo is naturally present in the soil, except in America because we killed the soil.
Am I correct in thinking all those blue zones too are some element of meat? Is that right?
As they age, they eat less and less meat,
Yep.
but the meat they eat is very high quality. But the mushroom piece was huge, and particularly in the areas around the Mediterranean, they consume a ton of porcini mushrooms. Porcinis have the highest content of ergo. So if you're going to do GLP-1s, do ergo and get adjusted.
So just an update on this too, just because I haven't looked at it in a while. Last time I researched, I found out that we believe human beings are the only species on the face of the earth that have these dedicated ergothioneine receptors.
Yeah.
So you just talked very, very briefly, an overview of what it does for you. But for every patient watching this of mine, this is why I tell you take a mushroom.
Eat your mushrooms.
Yeah, eat them.
Or take an extract.
And if you don't like them, yeah, exactly. Or if you don't like them, swallow them. So get them encapsulated. But it's it's kind of almost become my multivitamin.
Yeah.
And if anybody ever told me I want you to take, I'm only taking one supplement, it's a mushroom.
One of the questions we talked about when we started today was, this midlife idea.
Right.
And Brandon's story is awesome. Like, this dude found a reason to live. And what's life worth living for? Part 2, part 3. Now you have an amazing family. You have an incredible dog who I love. But that dog will eat other people, but it's a
Not
cool
people,
dog.
Other animals.
Other animals.
Animals, yeah.
He loves people.
We love your dog. So what do you have worth living for? What's next? What's the point? And when I think of that in the landscape of nutrition, I think there's this component I do about the interconnectedness of all living things. When we look at the fungal kingdom, and then we look at plants and animals, but we're going way back to like elementary biology, but you got fungi, you got plants, you got animals, allegedly, depending on who you talk to. So the fungi were here first. And we think, well, plants are cool because they make medicines for us, and we have things in our cells that do things with the medicines. But what was just discovered is plants only make those medicines when they're stressed out by fungi.
Oh, interesting.
So like ginkgo, if the ginkgo leaf has a little mold on it, the leaf responds and it makes ginkgolides and quercetin. And then we eat the leaf, or we make a tea, and we get those medicines. So you ask me what's worth living for? I'm like, you've got millions of years of tiny little mushrooms popping up going, sup, bro? And then the plants are like, I think we can work together. And then here we are as mammals, and we've got all this
Benefiting
cool,
from all
and
this.
I'm like, we gotta stick around. I gotta see how this turns out. And my herbal teacher, Carrie Bone, will echo the same statement Rudolf Steiner talked about, and that is, for everything that bothers humans, for every human illness, there's a plant out there that can help us get through it. And I want to put an addendum to that and say there's also a fungi that will help the plant that helps the human.
But we're just figuring this stuff out, right?
Just like last week.
Yeah, it's definitely new. What mushrooms, what fungi are the best for brain function?
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about lion's mane a few months
Sure.
ago. That's kind of the mainstream one that most people know. I'd probably go as far as saying all of them have a benefit, but that's the one that's most known for it. I really think it comes down to, and I think you'd agree with this, what we know about the mushrooms is they mostly have the same things in them, just different concentrations, whether the chitin, beta-glucans, ergothioneine, so we can use those profiles for different things, so some are more adaptogenic and they help you just deal with stress, things of that nature. So, but I would say probably lion's mane. Yeah,
Lots of
you got another
research on
favorite?
lion's mane.
Yeah, it's definitely the most well known and researched.
When you look at its scientific name, it's Hericium erinaceus, which sounds like a Harry Potter spell, right?
Sure.
Like, you just turned him into a mushroom, man. But when you look at the power of a name, and lion's mane, when you look at it in nature, it looks like a brain.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of
Sure
it.
does.
So that's called the law of similars that we follow. If we see something in nature that looks like a body part, then it's probably going to be good for the body part. Like when you crack open a walnut,
Looks like a
looks
brain.
like a brain. Well, the fatty acids in
I
the
love
walnut are
walnuts.
good for the brain.
Yeah.
And as you go down the mushroom tree, my Swiss Army knife of mushrooms is the reishi mushroom, and that's Ganoderma lucidum. But again, what's funny about shrooms is they're picky. So a Ganoderma, reishi mushroom, it only wants to eat wood. Like reishi gives me wood because reishi loves wood. And in commercial mushroom manufacturing, they try to grow it on grain. And it doesn't like
doesn't
it.
work.
It'll grow, but it doesn't have the medicine, those bitter components in the reishi
Doesn't have the
mushroom.
nutrients.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so quality is a big deal, but
Yeah.
reishi, there's nothing wrong with making a lion's mane pancake. You just fry that sucker in avocado oil, press it down. Porcinis, big fan of porcinis. But I would say to everybody, if you see mushrooms on the menu, you're at an Italian restaurant, get some.
My wife loves mushrooms.
Oh, I do too. Have you ever actually eaten tremella?
I tried it. It is the snottiest mushroom
Yeah.
I've ever had.
Just slimy.
It's goo, yeah.
It's weird. It's kind of hardly not a mushroom, but
Yeah, if
I
you
just wonder
soak
if
it,
you'd eat
you got to soak it overnight, and then you can turn it into spaghetti.
Well, I know that Lee likes to make all his soups and
Yeah.
drinks and stuff from it. So, and just so you know, a couple minutes ago you said Ganko.
Ginkgo biloba.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go Australian when I'm thinking herbal.
I love
does.
it.
Is this way?
He goes Eastern Indian sometimes
If
too.
we're doing pathology, I'm really talking with an accent because that's how I learned it. But that's how we learn, right? It's the
Sure.
power of the word.
Yep. Yeah, when I first started dating my wife, I took her on a mushroom date. And this is a crazy story. Mike, the gentleman you're friends with from Iowa.
Oh yeah, hold
Right?
my mic, yeah.
So I'm married to a farm girl. She grew up on a farm in Iowa. I told her to put her boots on and some pair of jeans. Unbeknownst to me, she thought I was taking her horseback riding because she loves horses. We show up at Mike's farm and we go morel mushroom hunting.
Oh nice.
She couldn't believe. She's like, "What are we doing?" I think we ended up finding like 3 bread sack full of morels that day.
No.
So that was her introduction to mushroom hunting.
I've gotten mushrooms, turkeys, and deer off that property. That's a special
All in the
place.
same day.
Well, maybe.
Probably.
Hey, shout out to the Boathouse for the best mushroom bisque around. They do a morel bisque.
Ooh,
So
Isn't that top
if you're in
notch?
town, hit the Boathouse, get the morel bisque. You won't be disappointed.
I
nice.
go out there with the VIP though.
Well, I got to go with you though, because we're not getting in otherwise.
There you go.
So these are good stories. I mean, that's the point of life worth living, is to share stories and
Sure.
have people to share them with. So,
Yeah. You know, we're kind of, excuse me, following back on this midlife thing too. You know, recently, I guess just as things have evolved for me, I've gotten into a clientele of 30 to 40 somethings that have been extremely successful financially, but they're a disaster.
Yeah.
So one of the things that ties right into this is like, what are you doing and what do you want out of this? Are you trying to pass
Right.
a gazillion dollars onto your kid and die at 45? You know, what's going on?
That was his opening story.
Yeah. So
Financial
what is,
planning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what's your purpose and what do you want in the end? You know, are you building this nest egg to enjoy it or to run yourself into the ground? And it's so amazing how we get lost in that world.
Well, yeah, but then we're getting down into priorities and values.
Sure.
So that's an interesting conversation because I've lost a couple of friends in midlife that have prioritized those kind of things. I've got a friend that built a huge house on the lake, and I'm like, dude, you're going to have a heart attack within 5 years. Like, your priorities are so far out of whack. You never pay any attention to your health. There's no point of putting that much effort into the financial end if you don't have these other things in order. So that's kind of how I thought about it too.
Yeah.
And on a side note, I was 3 classes from my CPA exam when I switched. So
Yep.
I was heading in that financial bracket too.
Saw the light.
Bunch of pencil pushers.
Oh, man.
I could frisbee an iPad pretty far.
I couldn't imagine, me personally, I didn't have the temperament to do that. I definitely enjoy working with people. I just love all that.
You're where you should be.
I'm definitely where I should be. I'm very happy with the choices that we've made to be where I'm at. So
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm the guy with no financial anything sense. So just no training.
I'll take your call.
Fair enough. All right. Fair enough.
There's a line one of my mentors gave me recently. He's very old. He said at this stage of his life that all of the stories he has are about to become legend because there's no one left alive that was witness to it.
Sounds
And,
Dr. Cassie.
Kinda. And I'm like, we're all gonna be legends someday. But nobody cares if you had a big house on the lake. That's
Nope.
not legendary.
no,
Other than, the shenanigans that happened at the house, that could be legendary.
that could be legendary.
But,
Yeah, and you come up to some of these wealthier areas, there's thousands of huge houses on the lake. Nobody really cares, right? One of my neighbors, his father was, I think, 98 when he passed away. He said something similar. He had no friends anymore. And he was the former police chief for Harbor Springs. And he's like, I've outlived everybody. My wife, all my friends, everything. So it can get a little lonely when you're that old and you don't have a lot of people in your age group to talk with.
gotta get younger friends.
You got to get younger friends, keep doing stuff. Yep. I used to hang out with him. I learned my gardening stuff from him. I learned how to smoke fish like really well. And he gave me a recipe that he said, if I give this to you, you're not allowed to give it to anybody until you're at my age and you have to pass it on. So I still use that fish recipe today.
Oh, nice.
I'll see you in 50 years.
Oh yeah, it's a good. I'll give you some of the smoked fish sometime, and you will definitely agree. It'll be some of the best smoked fish you ever have. But he spent a lifetime perfecting it, so it was really neat. And he indirectly does some chemistry to get the brine correct, and that's the part that I liked. Was learning that. Yep. Oh yeah.
Secret dust.
There's a secret to getting that brine perfect, and that was what he had kind of taught me with that.
Sounds like life.
Yep. Yeah, that's
No
good.
kidding, right?
So, midlife, you're raising a couple of kids. You're married. You got a whole bunch going on. What are some of the things that you're focusing on as you're still growing and teaching people this stuff? And what do you want to do in the next 5 years?
Focus. Focus is tough. Focus is hard because my heart pulls me in two different directions. The very most important thing in this world to me is my family. I know you guys will say the same thing. But what we do and what I call true doctoring, looking your patient in the eye and understanding what they're going through, takes a lot out of your soul too. So you get kind of pulled between both. But in the end, my purpose is the same as just, enrich as many lives as possible. It's just my family's more important to me. So, it's my midlife plays out like my professional life. I limit it as much as I can so that I am fortunate enough to spend as much time as possibly with my family, my girls. I've got 3 beautiful little girls, of which my wife and I were both told we would never be able to have children.
Right.
So, and I sit in front of you here with a vasectomy because she wouldn't stop having them. Somebody explain that to me. So,
Would have had a little football team, huh?
yeah, we were working on it. So, but no, so midlife for me is staying focused on what's important to me, because we all know if you're not good to yourself, you're not good to, you're no good to anybody.
Sure.
So, being strong in my convictions, making sure that I'm staying up with the latest technology, the latest information, so that I can know in the end of my, in my inner being, that I'm doing the very best I can to give something people that I think has great value. So, yeah, so I mean, I guess that's my jam right now.
So, Doc, you said you're picking up the torch.
Yeah, well, Brandon's focused. I know he doesn't say he's focused, but that's focused.
He's focused.
Yeah.
He's dialed in.
Yeah, I stood up. I grabbed the torch.
So what does that
kicking
mean?
and screaming. No, I don't want to do this. Too much work.
It is.
But like anything else, it's rewarding. So I've got maybe an esoteric view on things. I'm a little further along. My son is 21.
That's your youngest?
Living the dream. He's the oldest. My youngest is almost 18. She's graduating. So they're independent humans. They don't need us. My only job was keep them safe, keep them warm, and they do that themselves. So go do that. Next 5 years, I want to take each day from sunrise to sunset, which is tough in southeastern Michigan because what's the sun? So I get to travel, and I make sure I get to go to sunny places. And,
Nice.
Sunrise to sunset, what's happening between those two bookends, and then make sure you take enough time for yourself to reload, recover, refresh, reorganize. Then the next sunrise, you get a new look. What else are we going to do? How do we make an impact? And Dr. Cass, you brought up Rob Cass. Mentor's still around, world's best beard. And he likes this Tibetan concept where, you impact one person, that person impacts 2. Those 2 impact 3 more, and now you're at 10,000.
Oh, yeah. Big impact.
So this conversation we're having today should impact a handful of people.
It's going to touch a lot of lives.
That's why I'm here. I mean, I'm on my way to Whitefish Point to just kind of build a fire in the snow.
Chill out.
That's how I'm going to reboot.
Yeah.
And
watch the sunrise tomorrow.
that's the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good plan. So, as we're thinking about these health things, what do you guys do to stay in shape? You guys exercising?
As often as possible. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. I chase him on a mountain bike. He's an animal. I can't keep up with him.
You got your bike with you?
No, I know what it's like in the UP right now.
Too much snow
It's
right now.
silly. I got snowshoes.
You're going to use those.
I know.
Whitefish Point, is that by
North of Paradise.
Paradise? Yeah. Paradise got hammered with snow this year.
I know. That's where I'm going.
Yeah. So one of my good buddies, his parents own not the restaurant, the hotel in Paradise.
The big one?
The big one.
Magnuson.
Yeah, right on the strip there.
Well, I'm going to go get breakfast there and said you said I could.
There you go.
It's the only place for breakfast, I think.
I don't even
Probably.
think it's open.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's good. So as we're, talking about this midlife stuff and figuring out our purpose, you guys both are pretty strong in your identity, right? Because identity is complex, right? I mean, it can change. Sometimes you have control over it. Sometimes you don't. Where do you pull your identity from? Is it a healer? Is it a dad?
Yeah, I think every aspect of my life. To be totally honest with you, my identity is what people have allowed it to be. So, I take everything that I've learned, what I am, my personality, and I share that with people and what are the space that I fit into. That's, that is my purpose, my drive, whatever. So, so I'm whatever people will allow me to be.
Sure. Doc?
So I have a 8x10 picture of my grandpa when he was 19 in World War II, 1939, and his war medals are there, and I have the sidearm that he was gifted from the Belgian secret police, and it's in my wine cellar, so woe to me.
I've seen it.
But when I look at that picture, and the reason it's on display is I think about what he was going through at that time, and I think about what we have to go through as guys at this time, and the only message I keep getting is do better. You have an opportunity, just keep doing better. And as long as you keep trying to do a little bit better than before, you don't have to do it all at once, but just a little bit. Life's the long game. Then each time you say to yourself, I'm going to do better, you're a leader. And people want to do that.
Sure. That's a good psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Yeah, I remember Randy Tent saying the worst thing you could possibly do is nothing at all.
Yeah.
So,
And he'll never do nothing at all.
no. I don't think we could harness him in this room, could we?
The room's not big enough.
He's busy.
He needs to stand.
Yeah, he's just he's a giant. That's his passion.
Yep.
He's helped thousands and thousands of people.
Is he speaking on health?
They don't generally let him.
No, you don't give him a mic anymore.
He's that much of an animal.
Let me say that the only time I've ever seen him speak, it wouldn't be appropriate to tell everyone here how he opened.
Yeah. I actually took the microphone away from him.
That's how bad he was. At a seminar?
He was on stage with him. Yeah. He got really fired up.
Yeah.
Do you remember what he was fired up about?
Yeah, but it's not appropriate because it was involving fertility and the human race and neurodivergence.
So, yeah, I could see why you took the mic.
He's talking something about genitals. Yeah,
And
we'll leave it there.
Yeah, we got into abortion. And I'm like, you got to stop.
Yeah. Just wasn't appropriate for the audience.
Yeah.
No.
Not work appropriate.
Yep. Yep. So,
But help a lot of people.
all right. Anything else you guys want to touch on?
Man, I think we covered a ton of stuff.
Sure.
So, this has been great. I like doing this because I learned stuff from both of you, and hopefully we've shared some really valuable stuff for other people. And
Well, we're definitely going to get some questions. So, at some point, I'll email. Yep. Send them all to
I'll send
Brandon.
him to Brandon.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, you're checking out for a week, right?
Yeah.
Out of here.
I think a good take-home message too is if you think you're utterly alone, you're never alone. We're all on this blue marble rocking through the universe. We're all passengers. Reach out.
Right.
I mean,
All trying to figure out why we're here.
exactly.
Yeah. No, that's a good question.
Big breath.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess in closing too, I would say, since COVID, because we'll all agree that was a turning point for humanity, a lot of people have started to question healthcare in general. And the problem I think a lot of people have fallen into is finding an ally to do it. So do not quit. Be your own advocate. You will find somebody that resonates with what you're looking for and can help you achieve those goals. Because there is nothing more valuable in life than health. And working hard to have your health is so worth it. You just have to get that momentum. And yeah, like you were saying, there's no destitute situation.
Yeah.
Almost everything can be fixed. And I will tell you this, when I was at my sickest, I didn't have to look very far to see somebody that had it way worse. So there's a lot of struggle out there.
There's a lot of struggle.
That's why we're on a mission.
So talking about changing health, what about RFK Jr. stepping in and not making it ultra political?
Right.
Because, if you study him, he was a Democrat for his entire life. And then he started to get a little disenfranchised with some of that ideology. So he switches over. He gets named, Department of Health and Human Services?
HHS, yeah.
Yeah. I did listen to a couple of his interviews. There were some things he's not very brushed up on. But some of his ideas are going to change the way the United States functions. What do you think about someone like that? Stepping in and stepping up and...
He has 4 years.
Okay.
He is well-schooled, educated.
He is an attorney.
He has his own personal health journey
Yeah.
that most people don't know about. He is a picture of health.
He's in good shape.
Particularly for a guy his age, he's going to crush people in their 30s.
Yep.
But I think at the fundamental landscape of health in America right now, I think his message is American health is not for sale to any lobby or organization that wants to cheapen our life expansion. We have the gift really of America is life, liberty, and the pursuit. Not the guarantee, but you get the opportunity. If you want it, go get it. And I think what HHS has allowed is the infiltration of what we'll call the medical industrial complex to take over the food supply. And so they have intentionally sickened the American people with allowing roughly 600 food additives that don't exist in the rest of the world.
That's wild.
So his big button is let's clean up the food supply. Let's get rid of these people that were trying to weaken America and see if the American public will actually understand that, spicy food's okay as long as it's not a flaming hot Cheeto.
Well, and he's not making a political statement when he says you need to take additives out of food.
It's science.
So if somebody makes that political, they're completely just turning that into propaganda. That is a true statement that we would be better off getting these things out of our food.
Yeah. Go around the world. Countries that don't have these food additives, they don't have our sickness.
No,
They
we
have
have
other problems. But
we have very unique sicknesses to our population.
Sure.
So, yeah. So with RFK, I mean, of course, it's exciting for people in our seat, but like I said, this of course is not political whatsoever. But the way our government's designed is to not do anything fast. So, we got 4 years to get this information out there that just can't be done in 4 years thoroughly. But I think what we truly can expect is maybe not a whole bunch of change, but a lot of awareness. And I hope that what people get out of this is, hey, red dye number 2 does cause blah, 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 blah.
Well, definitely
let's get
inflammation,
rid of
right?
it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, ADHD, things like of that nature. I hate using that because it's not a real thing. But anyway, so yeah, I hope there's a bigger awareness, and I hope people will be more responsible for their own health. And what's been created throughout our lifetimes is zero responsibility for your health because you don't need it if your insurance doesn't cover it. And drugs will fix everything, and they won't.
Yeah, I've ran into that philosophy. I had a patient in his mid-40s that's diabetic, and I was just kind of getting his health psychology. And I said, what happened? And he goes, I thought they'd have a medication for this. That was what he was banking on.
Yeah.
And now he's insulin dependent, all kinds of complications from the diabetes that will never change. Like the damage has been done pretty deep.
Yeah.
So that was a misunderstanding of health and applying that philosophy.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, kind of to play into that a little bit too, I just remember when I was talking to you recently, and you haven't heard this is pretty good. He was giving some health advice outside of the scope of chiropractic.
Oh, boy.
And this patient looked at you and said, why can't you just be a chiropractor?
Yeah. Stay in your lane.
I've heard that. I've heard that many times.
Yeah. So I was like, well,
You're allergic to it. You have to just spit the truth.
Well, it's interesting. So when someone makes that kind of statement, just chiropractic, they're basically saying, just deal with my pain.
Right.
And one of those stories, there was a lady that I saw a whole bunch of markers that she was going to have some complications. She's the one that said that to me. And then it was maybe 6 months later, she's got a diabetic pump on her hip. And I felt so bad. But as I learn human psychology, I understand a lot more now with where people are coming from. Sometimes people are just flat out overwhelmed and they don't want to address it. Other times it's identity issues. Like people literally, they identify as a victim. They use their health, as part of their story all the time for gaining leverage on that stuff. So it was real interesting doing that. But one of the better stories I had was a lady came in here a couple of years ago, and she said she spent 12 years in Japan, and in Japan, people pay their doctors to stay healthy. I was like, oh, that's an interesting concept.
yeah,
And she said, we don't look for a new doc until the doc isn't doing his job, which is kind of to keep people healthy. And she said, when she found me, it was the closest thing she's found in northern Michigan to what she found over there. And if we look at the health statistics, Japan ranks very high, overall health, longevity, but they're very proactive, very preventative. They're doing their Tai Chi and their
I think they're mushroom eaters too, huh?
A lot of mushrooms.
a lot of mushrooms in
Weird.
Japan.
Weird.
Yeah, so those are interesting things. We don't pay our doctors in the United States until end stage.
Right.
Typically, that's when people interact. I did have a insurance executive here, and I got to ask him that question one time: why insurance only pays for treatment and never pays for any kind of preventative? And he said basically the way we look at it is at some point in your life you're going to have the treatment, so we don't want to be on the hook for the prevention as well. So we've just decided to only pay for the treatment.
Wow, is that short-sighted?
Well, that's how the healthcare industry is wired.
Right.
Yep.
Well, that's the way it works now, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's definitely it. So, all right.
Parting thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have too many. It was a fabulous conversation. I love learning.
Yeah.
Some good stuff. I'm definitely going to have to email you guys and get some of the names of the things that you mentioned. So if we're going to get questions.
Yeah,
People are going to
absolutely.
ask. They're going to want to probably see both of you guys and we'll get some supplement mushroom questions.
Right. Yeah, direct all questions to him. He's the smartest one in the room. No, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And anybody that knows me knows that if I don't know the answer, I'll find out for you.
Let's do that.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Send it all to
right.
Brandon.
Mikey, thanks, my man. This
Hey.
means a lot to me when you put this together, and this is important stuff to
Thank
share.
you for your time. I appreciate you coming up.
Purpose driven.
Thank you. Dr. Brockenshire, I appreciate you swinging in on your way north.
Anytime, man. Anytime.
Been a great conversation. All right, we're going to part. Thank you
Sign
guys for
off.
listening.
Adios.
Have a great weekend.